Some truths rot in the dark waters of the swamp, but mine needed the sun. My name is Cordelia Beauchamp, and what you're about to hear is the story of how I survived. I never imagined I'd speak these words aloud, let alone share them publicly at the age of 83. People look at me now, an old woman, a grandmother to 5, still living in the same time-worn cabin on the edge of the Okefenokee Swamp in southern Georgia, and they have no idea what I've carried in silence for decades. The stillness of the marsh and the cathedral of cypress trees may seem serene now, but long ago, they stood witness to my pain, watching and saying nothing. Before I open the door to those memories, let me ask something small from you if you want to hear more true stories like mine. Please subscribe to this channel. It's taken me a lifetime to find the strength to speak. Every listener matters. And if you're here, leave a comment telling me where you're watching from. Knowing that someone far away is listening, that my story is crossing rivers, oceans, time zones, gives me courage. Now let me tell you where this nightmare began. I was born in 1942, in a pocket of Charlton County so remote that even now it feels untouched by time. Back then, it was even more isolated. We lived by the land and the water. My father, Elia, ran a humble bait and tackle shop, catering to the rare tourists brave enough to explore the swamp's shadowy waters. The swamp provides, Daddy always said, and it did. It gave us fish from its depths, deer and rabbit from the woods, and vegetables from our little patch of garden. We didn't have money, but we had enough. My mother, Rose, had a quiet strength and a gift for weaving baskets out of sweetgrass. She'd sell them in Folkestone, the nearest town, 20 miles away. I used to think we had a hard but peaceful life. But I was just a child, and childhood doesn't yet know how to see the shadows hiding inside what seems whole. In 1943, the world knocked on our door in the form of a letter bearing the U.S.S. Army seal. Daddy was drafted. Mama cried silently in the kitchen as he packed. I was too young to grasp what war truly meant, but I knew it stole the light from her eyes and the laughter from our dinners. For 2 years, we managed without him. The bait shop closed, and Mama took over the garden while sewing repairs for neighbors in exchange for food or supplies. I helped as best I could, gathering eggs, pulling weeds, keeping quiet. We made do. But when Daddy came home in 1945, he wasn't the man we'd been praying for. He looked the same: broad shoulders, sun-darkened skin, the same faded tattoos on his forearms. But his spirit was different. Gone was the mischief in his grin, the warmth in his touch. His eyes had changed. Once like shining amber, they now held shadows that never lifted, clouded by things he'd seen and refused to speak about. At first, we tried to welcome him back gently. Mama made his favorite stew. I brought him flowers from the edge of the marsh. But his silences grew longer. His gaze drifted like he was still scanning jungle foliage, still waiting for danger. And then came the bottle. Old Man Jenkins, who ran an illegal still deep in the cypress, started selling Daddy moonshine. At first, it was only weekends, when the nightmares woke him, drenched in sweat and shaking. Then the weekends became weekdays. Soon, he was rarely sober. The smell of alcohol became part of our home, the sour burn of cheap whiskey clinging to his clothes and breath. I learned to read the signs. The thud of his boots told me how much he'd drunk. The way he shut the door told me how bad the night would be. Our little cabin, once a haven built by Grandpa's hands to keep us safe from rising floodwaters, now felt like it was sinking under the weight of something invisible, something mean, something violent. Our cabin stood on stilts to guard against the swamp's seasonal floods, with a wraparound porch where Mama and I used to sit in the evenings, shelling peas and watching herons dip into the water. It had once felt like a safe little world, but after Daddy came home, it turned into a place of dread. Get somewhere he can't see you. Mama would whisper when the low growl of his boat motor echoed across the cattails. Go on now, baby. Make yourself small. I obeyed without question. My hiding spot was beneath the floorboards. Mama had shown it to me herself. A loose plank under my bed lifted up to reveal a hollow barely large enough for my little body. I would curl up there, clutching my knees, holding my breath, and listening. From that cramped space, I could hear every sound, the porch steps groaning under his weight, the door flinging open, and his voice thick with liquor, sharp with rage. Where's my damn dinner? This place is a pigsty. It didn't matter how spotless Mama kept the house or how timely the meal was. Nothing ever satisfied him. The first time he struck her, I didn't understand what I'd heard. A sound like a branch snapping, followed by Mama's choked gasp. Then her voice, pleading softly. Please, Elijah, Cordelia will hear you. But her begging only fueled his fury. Let her hear. He shouted. Let the whole swamp hear. This is my house. You both will learn respect. That night marked a shift. From then on, violence became routine. Whenever he was disappointed by a slow fishing day, a rude tourist, or a busted motor, he took it out on us. Mama always stood between him and my bedroom, shielding me with her body, taking the worst of it. But sometimes even she couldn't protect me. Some nights, I'd hear him slurring. Where is she, that little brat's hiding again? My heart would pound so loud I thought the floor would shake. I would pray to the swamp itself that he wouldn't find me. But the swamp doesn't protect. It only watches. No one came when we screamed. But we never really screamed. The swamp swallowed sound the way it swallowed everything whole and without a trace. Our nearest neighbors, the Wilkes family, lived 2 miles downriver. And by the time a cry might have traveled that far, the silence would have already returned. But even if they'd heard, I doubt they would have come. Out here, people mind their own. What happens behind a man's door stays there. That's the rule. Especially if the man in question served his country and walks around town with a firm handshake and Sunday manners. Mama started covering the bruises. Long sleeves even when the Georgia summer smothered us in heat thick as syrup. She smiled at the women in town, told them she tripped on the dock, slipped gathering firewood. I followed her lead. When my lips split open from an accidental backhand meant to scare, not injure, though it did both. I told my teacher I'd walked into a door. I even practiced how to say it with a little embarrassed laugh. Like it was silly. Like it was my fault for being clumsy. The worst night came when I was 10. It had rained for days. The swamp overflowed, rising up like it was angry. Daddy couldn't fish, couldn't take tourists, couldn't leave the house. He paced like a trapped animal, liquor in hand, muttering under his breath. The storm outside had nothing on the storm brewing inside him. I was hiding under the floor again when it happened. Mama screamed a real scream this time. Not muffled, not hidden. A sound that tore through the air like lightning. Glass shattered. Something, maybe a chair. Maybe a body hit the floor so hard I felt it through the boards. And then, nothing. No footsteps. No shouting. Just a terrible, aching silence. I don't remember deciding to come out. I only remember the feeling. If I didn't move, Mama might never move again. I pushed the floorboard up and crawled into the open. The storm raged outside, lightning cracking across the sky like broken glass. But inside the cabin, It was strangely still. So still, it made the hairs on my arms rise. Daddy stood over Mama, breathing hard, swaying slightly. A jagged bottleneck glistened in his hand, its edges stained with blood. The rest of the bottle lay shattered at his feet, the sharp scent of whiskey mixing with something metallic. Mama wasn't moving. I don't remember walking toward them, I just remember hearing myself say, "You killed her." The words left my lips like a whisper, but they felt like thunder in my chest. Daddy turned, eyes slow to focus. For a moment, he didn't recognize me. And then he did. A flicker of something passed through his expression, maybe guilt. Maybe just confusion. But it didn't matter. That was the moment everything changed. Mama didn't die that night, though sometimes I wonder if part of her did. Her body survived. But her spirit, her spark dimmed after that. It was me who got in the spare John boat and paddled through the flooded swamp to the Wilkes dock in the dark. Me, soaked to the bone, begging them to let me use their phone. Doctor Harrison came from town. He stitched the gash on Mama's forehead and set her broken arm. He said little, his mouth a tight line. Daddy, suddenly sober and calm, told him she'd slipped. Storm made the boards slick, he explained with convincing concern. Poor Rose never watches her step. The doctor didn't argue. He looked at Mama, then at me, then back at Daddy. Let her rest, was all he said. Then he left us there again, as if it were just another accident in a house where bad luck liked to visit. But from that night on, Daddy changed again, not in kindness, but in calculation. He learned to hide the bruises better. He threatened Mama to keep me quiet. And me, I learned the rules of surviving in a house built on silence. After that night, the bruises faded slower, but the silence hardened. Daddy didn't hit less, he just got smarter. He aimed where sleeves could cover, where collars could hide. The violence no longer exploded, it simmered. Calculated and cold. Mama stopped meeting anyone's gaze in town. Even when Mrs. Jenkins at the general store gently asked about the yellowing bruise on her cheek. Mama smiled like it was nothing. Silly me, she'd say softly. Slipped on the dock again. Always the dock. Always a fall. Always an excuse. I followed her lead. When a teacher noticed my limp or a cut on my forehead, I had a story ready. Climbed a tree I shouldn't have. Ran into the barn door. I became a child fluent in deception. Fluent in fear. The world beyond our swamp didn't ask questions. Not because they didn't suspect, but because they didn't want to know. Neighbors lived too far to hear us. And even if they had, folks in Charlton County followed an unwritten rule. A man's house is his kingdom. His business stays his own. By the time I was 13, I knew the rhythm of our lives the way others knew the seasons. I could read the warning signs like weather patterns. If the fish weren't biting that week, if a tourist dared complain, if the boat engine sputtered, all of it meant danger. And Mama, she shrank. Not just in posture, but in presence. She wore her long sleeves like armor and kept her voice low, almost apologetic. She tried to anticipate his moods before they arrived, timing dinner perfectly, avoiding certain words, never looking him directly in the eye unless he invited it. She still loved me fiercely. I know that. But she became dimmer, like a lamp turned too low, afraid to shine too bright. By 16, I'd become an expert in pretending. At school, I was the quiet girl who smiled politely, got good grades, and never caused trouble. The teachers praised my neat handwriting. The pastor at our Baptist church complimented my singing voice in the choir. On Sundays, we arrived like clockwork, Daddy in his ironed shirt, Mama and me in dresses that covered every bruise. From the outside, we looked like the kind of family that belonged on a postcard. Simple folks, honest, church-going. The Beauchamps are good stock. I once heard Mrs. Calloway whisper at a church picnic, "Elijah served his country. And look how he cares for his wife and daughter." I wanted to scream, to shatter their illusion. But instead, I handed her another slice of Mama's sweet potato pie and smiled like a good girl should. At home, I became the glue holding us together. I cleaned. I cooked. I kept things quiet. I deflected his moods when Mama couldn't. My whole life was built around one mission: keep the peace. Not because I believed it would save us, but because I knew what happened when it broke. And yet, I dreamed. Not loudly, not openly, but in the quiet corners of my mind. I imagined a world beyond the swamp. A world where dinner didn't depend on fear, where a slam door didn't mean danger. But dreams are dangerous when you live under someone else's rule. Hope becomes a liability. And silence, the only currency that keeps you breathing. There was one boy who nearly pulled me out of the shadows. Jackson Tanner. He was the son of the general store owner in Folkestone, the same place where Mama sold her sweetgrass baskets. He was a kind boy, with sandy hair, calloused hands, and a quiet way of speaking that made you lean in to hear him better. Jackson noticed me. Not just in the polite way folks nod at each other in small towns, but really saw me. He'd offer to carry my packages, pass me a cold bottle of soda on summer days, linger by the porch pretending to be interested in fishing gear just so he could ask about my day. At first, I avoided him. Kindness felt unfamiliar, dangerous even. But he was patient. And slowly, I let him in just a little. The summer of '63, he asked if I'd go to the county fair with him. I said yes before fear could stop me. That night felt like something stolen from a life that wasn't mine. Laughter I hadn't heard from my own mouth in years. His fingers brushing mine on the Ferris wheel. Cotton candy melting sweet on my tongue. For a few precious hours, I wasn't the daughter of Elijah Beauchamp. I was just a girl being courted. Shy and hopeful. But fairy tales don't last long in the swamp. When Jackson brought me home, Daddy was already waiting, leaning on the porch railing like a predator watching its prey. He smiled at Jackson, polite and measured. But once that truck disappeared down the dirt road, he turned on me. "Think you're too good for us now," he hissed. Running off with store boys. Acting like some Sunday princess, he yanked me inside by the hair. His rage was sharp and fast. Like a whip. Mama tried to stop him. He struck her too. The next morning, Jackson came by with wildflowers. I met him at the dock, eyes already bruised, and told him I couldn't see him again. He asked why. I told him I didn't feel the same anymore. He looked confused, hurt. And then he left, taking that small flicker of light with him. After that, everything settled into something colder than routine. It became resignation. I took over more of the work at the bait shop. Daddy was either too drunk or too disinterested to keep it running. So I handled the supplies, smiled at the few customers, counted the money, and kept my head down. There were days he vanished into the swamp for stretches at a time, taking his boat and a jug of whiskey. When he was gone, it was like coming up for air. Mama and I would sit quietly on the porch, shelling peas, watching the frogs hop between the reeds, letting the silence wash over us like balm. We didn't talk about the bruises. We didn't talk about the fear. We just existed. Still, Careful. The days he returned were another matter. Whether he came back shouting or strangely calm, we never knew which version of him would walk through that door. But we always knew he was never empty. He always brought the storm with him. By the late 60s, the outside world was changing, but none of it reached us. We finally had electricity, and Daddy had managed to fix an old radio. From it, we heard voices speaking of protests, marches, distant wars, women demanding to be heard. But those voices may as well have come from the moon. Our lives remained suspended in an unchanging cycle. Me running the shop, Mama cooking and cleaning and shrinking, Daddy drinking and growing more bitter with every year that passed. And still, I stayed. Not because I didn't want to leave, but because I couldn't bear to leave her behind. Every time, Mama whispered, "Cordelia, go. You can't live like this." I answered, with the only truth I knew, "I won't leave you here with him." And she would just nod, her hands shaking slightly as she worked. She never told me she was proud, but she didn't need to. It was the fall of 1968 when something unexpected arrived in the swamp, not a storm, but a family. The Carpenters. They moved into Old Man Jenkins's place after he passed. Strangers from Maryland, full of fresh ideas and northern accents. Mr. Carpenter had some big notion about starting an eco-tour business out here, swamp tours, birdwatching, the kind of things locals didn't pay mind to. But they had a daughter. Her name was Sharon, same age as me, but everything else about her was foreign. She wore pants instead of dresses, spoke fast and loud, and walked like the world belonged to her. She had opinions, big ones, and she wasn't afraid to say them. She showed up at our shop one afternoon, curiosity practically sparking from her, asked about the swamp, the wildlife, my life. I answered politely, cautiously, but she kept coming back. Sharon wasn't like anyone I'd ever met. She didn't tiptoe around questions or pretend not to notice bruises. One afternoon, we sat on the dock, our legs dangling over the dark water. She looked out over the reeds and asked, "Don't you ever want more than this?" I remember pausing, startled. "This is all I've ever known," I said quietly. "That's not what I asked," she replied, turning to me. "Do you want more?" I didn't answer, because deep down, I did. Before I could speak, Daddy's boat came around the bend. His hands were loose on the motor, eyes glassy, even though the sun was still high. "You should go," I told Sharon. Standing quickly, she looked toward the boat, frowning. "We're having a cookout Saturday," she said as she packed up. "You and your folks should come." I just nodded, knowing full well we wouldn't But Sharon left something behind that day, not a pamphlet, not a gift, but a thought, a dangereuse, blooming idea. Maybe I didn't have to live and die in silence. That seed Sharon planted didn't grow right away. It sat there, quiet and waiting, until one early autumn afternoon in 1969, when everything snapped. Daddy had driven into town for supplies. He returned furious. The truck had gotten a flat on the dirt road. By the time he stepped inside, rage clung to him like heat. Mama was in the kitchen, preserving the last jars of vegetables from summer. I was outside hanging laundry, clothespins between my fingers. When I heard the first crash, I ran inside. He had her cornered against the counter, one hand gripping her throat. Broken mason jars littered the floor. The sharp tang of vinegar and fear filled the air. "You're worthless," he spat. "All these years I've kept food in your mouth. And what have you done? turned my daughter against me. Mama couldn't answer. She wasn't even struggling anymore, just staring up at him with dull eyes and limp arms. That look broke something inside me. I'd never hit anyone in my life. But I picked up the cast iron skillet from the stove, our heaviest one, black and solid. It felt like holding the truth in my hands. "Let her go," I said. My voice didn't shake. "Not this time." He turned, stunned. Mama slid to the floor, gasping. "What are you going to do?" "Girl," he sneered. "Hit your own father. After everything I've done for you." He stepped forward. Glass cracked beneath his boots. I held firm. I thought of Sharon. Of women marching in cities I'd only heard of. If they could fight, maybe so could I. I said, "Let her go." He laughed, harsh and ugly, and lunged. But drink had dulled his reflexes. I moved. I swung. The skillet connected with the side of his head with a sickening thud. He crumpled onto the floor. For a long second, I didn't breathe, didn't move. Then I dropped the pan and dropped to my knees beside Mama. Her eyes were wide. "What did you do?" "Cordelia," she whispered. "What I had to. What no one else ever would." He was still breathing. That was the first thing I noticed once the ringing in my ears began to fade. His chest rose and fell slowly, raggedly. Blood seeped from the side of his head, mixing with vinegar and broken glass. "Mama," I whispered, helping her sit up. She was dazed, eyes glassy, fingers trembling as she touched the bruises on her throat. "We can't stay," I said. She looked at me, confused. "What, we're leaving? Tonight?" Her eyes widened. "Cordelia." Where would we go? This isn't a home." "Mama, it's a trap. And I should have broken us out long ago." I helped her to the bedroom. "Pack only what you need. Just what you can carry." She moved like a ghost, her hands shaking as she folded a nightgown and tucked in a Bible. I grabbed what little I had saved, a change of clothes, a bit of cash I'd hidden over the years, a photo of my grandparents, $43, and a desperate hope. As we moved through the house, Daddy groaned from the kitchen. He was stirring. "We have to go now," I urged, grabbing both our bags and her hand. Outside, the swamp air clung thick and warm. The moon lit our wooden walkway in silver as we made our way to the water. We took the small john boat. It made less noise, and I pushed us off, rowing into the narrow channel that curved toward the Carpenters. Mama sat silent at the bow, her profile pale in the moonlight. She didn't cry. She had forgotten how to cry out loud years ago. The swamp at night was both menace and memory. Cicadas buzzed. Water lapped against the boat. An alligator's eyes shimmered in the distance. But I wasn't afraid of the swamp anymore. What I feared was behind us, unconscious on the kitchen floor. It took nearly an hour to reach the Carpenter's dock. Their cabin stood brighter than ours, ever had new wood. Screened porch. Solar panels catching moonlight like glass wings. They were outsiders, and their home showed it. But that night, their light felt like a beacon. As I tied up the john boat, the screen door creaked open. "Hello," Sharon's voice floated out, cautious but steady. "Who's there?" "It's Cordelia Beauchamp," I called back, helping Mama onto the dock. "We need help." A beam of light flashed across the dock, landing on my face, then on Mama's. Sharon stood at the top step, flashlight trembling slightly in her grip. Her face shifted in an instant from suspicion to alarm. "Come inside," she said firmly, turning to open the door wide. Inside was a flurry of movement. Mr. Carpenter calling someone on the phone. Mrs. Carpenter easing Mama into a chair. wiping blood from her neck with a cool cloth. Sharon pressed a cup of tea into my hands. I held it, too stunned to drink. You did the right thing. She kept whispering. You're safe now. But I knew better. Safety was a story people told to comfort the broken. Mr. Carpenter came back into the room, his face tight. I spoke with Sheriff Daniels. He said quietly, he's not likely to do anything without a witness. She nearly died. I said, you saw the bruises. He nodded. But he's your father, and he's friends with half the county. The truth settled like cold ash. Then I said it out loud. Like a final decision. We have to leave. Tonight? Far away. Mrs. Carpenter glanced at her husband, then turned to me. Where will you go? I hesitated. For the first time, I realized I didn't know. All I knew was we couldn't go back. I have a sister, Sharon said suddenly. In Baltimore. She works at a women's shelter. She could help you. Mama flinched at the word Baltimore, as if it were a foreign country. That's so far. She whispered. That's the point. I replied. Mr. Carpenter cleared his throat. I'm driving to Savannah tomorrow, picking up some equipment. I can take you to the bus station there. Bigger city. More buses. Hope that fragile, dangerous thing crept back into me. I don't have much money, I admitted. We'll help with the tickets. Mrs. Carpenter said without hesitation. It's what decent people do. Sharon disappeared into the back and returned with a small wooden box. My tip money, she said, placing a handful of bills in my palm. From last summer. It's yours. I wanted to refuse. I wanted to cry. But instead, I said, thank you. As steadily as I could. That night, they insisted we stay. Mrs. Carpenter made up the sofa bed. Sharon brought me pajamas and shared her room. Mama lay silently in the guest bed, staring at the ceiling. I didn't sleep much. Every creak of wood, every rustle of leaves made my heart race. I kept waiting to hear the hum of Daddy's boat engine. But it never came. Dawn arrived gently. Birdsong trickled through the trees. The swamp woke up like it always had, serene and ancient, as if the night before had never happened. Mr. Carpenter loaded our bags into his truck. Mrs. Carpenter pressed a paper bag of sandwiches into my hands. For the road? She said kindly. Sharon hugged me tight. Write to me, she said, slipping her address into my palm. Let me know you made it. Mama and I climbed into the truck. As the tires rolled away from the dock, I didn't dare look back. The ride to Savannah took nearly 3 hours. The road curved through pine forests, tiny towns, and stretches of nothing but silence. Mama sat beside me in the truck, her hands folded in her lap, her eyes on the blur outside the window. She didn't speak for most of the drive. I wasn't sure if she was saying goodbye to the only home she'd ever known, or if she was watching for signs of pursuit. Are we doing the right thing? She asked softly. Without looking at me, I took her hand. It felt small, almost weightless. For years, she had been my shield. Now I was hers. Yes, Mama, I said, steady as I could. We're finally doing the right thing. At the bus station, the world moved too fast. People bustled with suitcases and newspapers. Babies crying. Soldiers smoking cigarettes beneath. No smoking signs. The noise and motion overwhelmed me. I clutched our bags tighter. Mr. Carpenter bought our tickets himself, pressing 2 slips of paper into my hand. Baltimore, he said. You'll transfer in Charleston and Richmond. I nodded, overwhelmed with gratitude and dread. "Will you be okay?" he asked. "We'll figure it out," I said. And for the first time, I believed it. Mama and I found our seats halfway down the bus. She looked around like a child in a strange place, wide-eyed, stiff, unsure. "I've never been this far from home," she murmured. "Me neither," I said. "But we're together." As the bus pulled away from the station, I caught our reflection in the window, two women with hollow eyes and hunched shoulders, clinging to each other like castaways. We had no map, no plan, no safety net. But we had escaped. And that, for now, was enough. Baltimore in 1969 might as well have been another planet. Tall brick buildings blocked the horizon. Sirens wailed. Horns honked. People rushed everywhere, never making eye contact. Mama shrank beside me like a shadow, clutching her bag like it might float away. Judith, Sharon's sister, met us at the station. She had sharp eyes and a warm voice, the kind that made you want to believe her. She drove us through a neighborhood she called transitional. The houses were narrow, packed close together, with bars on some windows. "It's not perfect," she admitted, "but it's safe. That's what matters." The women's shelter was in a converted brownstone. One room, two beds, a shared bathroom at the end of the hall, a rule posted near the door: no men past the front steps. Those words felt like armor. But even armor can't stop the shaking that lives inside. Every time the front door opened, my heart leapt into my throat. I kept imagining Daddy barging in, dragging us back to Georgia. But he never came. Mama struggled more than I did. The city overwhelmed her. The people, the sounds, even the freedom. She didn't know how to make choices. What should I wear? Where do I go? Even deciding between oatmeal or toast left her paralyzed. She's been under control so long. The counselor told me, freedom feels like drowning. I started attending group sessions with other women, each carrying a story as heavy as mine. Marlene, beaten for overcooking dinner. Yvonne, with a cast on her arm. Teresa, who'd fled with 3 kids and nothing else. At first, I sat in silence. But one rainy afternoon, I opened my mouth and let it all out. I thought this was normal. I whispered. I thought all homes were like that. The crying came without warning, loud, and from deep inside. No one told me to stop. They just held my hands, my shoulders, my pain. It was the first time I realized we weren't weak. We were surviving. Healing didn't come all at once. It crept in slowly, like sunlight seeping under a closed door. Judith helped us find jobs. Mama began cleaning rooms at a hotel downtown. I got a waitress job at a diner near the harbor. The pay was small, the hours long, but the work was ours. We'd never had that before. By Christmas of 1969, we moved out of the shelter into a cramped one-bedroom apartment with peeling wallpaper and squeaky pipes. To anyone else, it might have seemed pitiful. But to us, it was a palace. Mama made it a home. She scrubbed the floors until they shined, hung curtains from the dollar store, arranged wildflowers in mason jars. She even started humming again, soft, broken tunes that slowly stitched her spirit back together. I kept going to the shelter's group meetings and eventually signed up for night classes at the community college. Judith helped me apply for a scholarship for women rebuilding their lives. I'd never seen a campus before. I didn't know how to register or where the classrooms were, but I showed up. Every night, I studied while Mama slept, scribbling notes in the margins of used textbooks. I learned about women's history, civil rights, biology, and how the world worked beyond the swamp. It was like meeting myself for the first time. Mama would watch me read at our tiny kitchen table. Pride and wonder in her eyes. I never thought about college. She said once, "In my day, girls got married. That was it." Well, I smiled. Times are changing. She reached across the table, took my hand. "I'm glad you get to change with them." And even though she never said the word out loud, I heard it in her silence, proud. Mama kept growing in quiet ways. While I threw myself into textbooks and night classes, she was carving out a life of her own slowly, tentatively, like someone learning to walk again after a fall. She started attending a nearby church, not for sermons, but for the sense of belonging. The women there welcomed her with casseroles and kind smiles. They taught her how to knit, invited her to their potlucks, and asked nothing in return. For the first time, Mama wasn't just someone's wife or someone's mother. She was her. She took to knitting like it was therapy, her fingers remembering how to create after decades of only surviving. Scarves, blankets, hats. Most of them she donated to the very shelter that gave us refuge. "This one's for a woman who's cold," she'd say, folding a soft gray shawl. "She doesn't even know yet that she'll be safe soon." It was her way of giving back, of believing. But healing wasn't a straight line. There were nights when a slammed door would make Mama freeze. Days when the cry of a child outside sent her into a silent spiral. We both flinched more often than we admitted. And sometimes, I would still wake up from dreams where I was back under those floorboards, waiting for footsteps that never came. Dorothy, the counselor from the shelter, had warned us trauma is sticky. It stays longer than it should. But so does strength. She was right. We were learning to live with both the fear and the fierceness. It didn't always feel like progress. But every morning we woke up in that apartment, free, alive, unbruised. That was victory. Tiny, quiet, sacred victories. In the spring of 1972, a letter arrived. It had been forwarded through the shelter, addressed in neat handwriting I hadn't seen in years. The return name stopped my breath, Sharon Carpenter. Inside, a single page. Simple, direct, and devastating. "Your father passed away this March. His boat was found drifting. The sheriff believes he fell in while drunk. They recovered the body 3 days later." I read the letter aloud to Mama. She didn't cry, didn't speak at first. She simply crossed herself, whispered a quiet prayer under her breath, then stood to boil water for tea, as if it were just another day. Later that night, I found her standing on our tiny balcony, eyes turned upward to the sliver of moon between rooftops. "I thought I'd feel something," she said. "Relief, maybe, or guilt, or grief." She shook her head. "But I just feel blank, like a door finally shut, and all that's left is silence." I walked up behind her and wrapped my arms gently around her shoulders. "You don't have to feel anything, Mama," I whispered. "Not for him." She leaned back into me, her body soft, relaxed for once, unguarded. "We're really free now, aren't we?" she asked. I didn't answer. I didn't need to, because in that still moment, we both knew the truth. The monster was gone, and the shadows he cast were beginning to fade. In the summer of 1972, a letter arrived forwarded from the shelter. The handwriting was familiar, Sharon Carpenter. Inside, a few simple lines that would change everything. "Your father passed away this spring. His boat was found adrift. They assume he was drunk and fell overboard. His body was found 3 days later. I read the words out loud. Mama didn't cry. She crossed herself, whispered a quiet prayer, and went to make tea like it was just another evening. Later, I found her on the small balcony, gazing up at the sliver of moon between the buildings. I thought I'd feel something, she said. Relief. Or grief. Or maybe guilt. But there's just nothing. That's okay, I told her, wrapping an arm around her shoulders. You don't owe him anything. She leaned into me, soft and tired. We're free now, she said quietly. And we were. 2 months later, I met Daniel at the city library. He was a graduate student, researching wetland ecosystems. When I told him I'd grown up in the Okefenokee, his eyes widened with genuine wonder. He listened not with pity, but with fascination. I told him about the swamp, the hum of insects, the cypress trees rising from the water, the way frogs sang at dusk. He said I spoke like a poet. We started seeing each other slowly. He brought me wildflowers. He always asked before touching me. He never raised his voice. I watched for red flags, but they never came. 6 months later, I introduced him to Mama. She was polite but cautious. It took nearly a year before she fully trusted him. But Daniel was patient. He never tried to fix us. He just stayed. Gentle. Steady. Kind. In October 1974, we married in a small ceremony at Mama's church. As I stood at the altar in a simple white dress, I saw Mama in the front pew, tears streaming down her cheeks, not from pain, but from joy. Our wedding night was spent in a cabin in the Blue Ridge Mountains, nothing like the one I grew up in. Daniel made sure there were neighbors nearby, a phone line, and that I always felt safe. He never rushed me. Every gesture was tender. Every pause, full of respect. Love isn't supposed to hurt, he whispered once, tracing the scar on my shoulder. You deserve gentleness. Cordelia. In 1976, our daughter Rose was born. We named her after Mama. When Mama held her, she trembled not from fear, but from awe. Motherhood didn't come easy. When Rose had her first tantrum screaming, inconsolable, I felt a flash of fear so strong I had to step outside, my hands shaking. What if I carried the same darkness in my blood? What if I became him? Daniel found me sitting on the back steps. Breath shallow. Face pale. He didn't ask questions. He just took my hand. You're not him, Cordelia, he said gently. You shows different. You walked away. Those words became my anchor. When our second child, Thomas, was born in 1979, I parented with intention. No yelling. No raised hands. Always space for apologies. For emotions. For questions. Love in our home meant safety. And when the kids asked about our past, especially the photo on the mantel of Mama and me with wary eyes and hollow cheeks, I told them only what they needed. Grandma and I had to leave our old home. It wasn't safe. Did someone hurt you? Rose asked once. Yes, I said. Honesty without weight. But we found people who showed us what real love looks like. Like your daddy. Like you. She nodded solemnly. I'm glad you're safe now. Me too. Mama lived with us until she passed quietly in 1992. She never spoke of the past in detail. Only of birdsong and biscuits and the quiet hush of the swamp. To my children, she was the gentle woman who knitted scarves and sang lullabies. At her funeral, I stood before a crowd of women friends from the shelter, the church, the neighborhood, and spoke of her strength. My mother survived what many couldn't. She found joy where there was none. Gave love, even after years of fear. She was the bravest woman I've ever known. Now, at 83, I sit on a porch, Daniel, and I built. Watching our grandchildren chase fireflies in the yard. The past still whispers sometimes in dreams. In sudden sounds, but it doesn't rule me anymore. Healing wasn't a single moment. It was thousands of small choices to speak. To stay soft. To love anyway. If you hear anything in my story, let it be this: you are not what happened to you. You are what you chose to become afterward. And it is never, ever too late. If my story has moved you even just a little, please know this: you are not alone. Some of us carry invisible wounds. Some of us are still learning what safety feels like. But healing is real. Change is possible. And freedom, though terrifying at first, is always worth the risk. I hope Cordelia's journey reminded you that the human spirit can endure, rebuild, and even thrive no matter where it began. Have you ever had to walk away from something that hurt you? Even when it felt impossible? Tell me in the comments. I read every single one. And if you believe stories like this deserve to be heard, help us spread them. Like this video, subscribe to the channel, turn on notifications so you don't miss the next story of courage and resilience. From my porch to yours. Thank you for listening.